Thank you so much, Kevin, for taking part in our Great Minds series. I think it goes without saying that Google is probably one of the most globally recognized brands, but to our viewers who aren't exactly sure about your business processes here in the UK, can you perhaps elaborate on your operating model?
The vast majority is search advertising in general. So currently our Q3 results came out last week. 11% are non-search, so non-advertising based, and that's Google for Work, our enterprise solutions, hardware sales, and other new business lines like Google Play, so our app store, so downloading apps on mobile devices. That's about 11% of our revenue now, so we are diversifying pretty quickly.
What are some of the key challenges facing the global tech sector at the moment, and how do you envisage the sector responding to some of these challenges?
I think a key thing is, as more and more services come about, people are going to use them, people love them. So let's look at some. Google Search, Maps on mobile, maybe future services like some medical, real-time medical feeds, your health information. For me, the key challenge in future will be around privacy and who owns the data. So that relationship between myself, where I am, and my health, as very personal things, but huge benefits for me if used in the right way, but clearly risks associated with them. So how people manage that data and balance off and communicate with users the benefit they're getting versus the risk that having that data out in the internet poses.
Innovation and the constant need to solve the most difficult of problems is at the heart of Google. What role does innovation play within Google, and how is this promoted within staff?
It's literally core to our business model, core to our DNA. You know, a company that grew from innovating around links on the internet, PageRank, Larry Page, realizing that the links between web pages could be useful for people. So we see innovation as dramatic change. What are the radical changes that can make the world a better place with technologies? And how we think about that in the company is different depending on which bit of the company you're in. So certain parts, like you may have heard about Google X and some of their projects, they are focused entirely on innovation. Some of the other parts of the business, advertising sales would be a good example, are less innovating on radical change, but more in the DNA. How are they thinking about change as a core capability for everyone?
So how can we work with organisations such as Google in terms of delivering talent for the future, but also educating the future leaders within these organisations?
Firstly, there's pure science and tech education. So the underlying skills around science and engineering and how that drives innovation and application of tech. British education now, is there enough science and technology? Is it forefront of people's minds? No. Do they understand why? And that brings me on to the second question. Why should it be at the forefront of people's minds? There's a story there around science and technology driving benefit for society. And I think in certain parts of the world that's known. In other parts, we don't think about it enough. So I'd say in the UK, does your average school kid really believe that science is driving benefit for mankind? And I would say probably not. They have other things that are more important for them. So advocating that, and then advocating that to leaders. Why would people want to lead in a sector? It's because they fundamentally believe that the work they're doing is driving some good for society.
What are some of the new and exciting products that Google are going to be launching in the coming years? And more importantly, how do you actually decide on what product to launch and what not? If you can take us through that process, please.
Clearly, I'm not going to tell you any deep secrets, and they don't trust me with the deeper secrets. Okay. But I would say, look at the trends that are happening. So the shift to mobile, the shift of consumer usage of devices from PCs to smartphones. That's core to how we're thinking about the world. But also then look at some of the products we've got already. So I mentioned search and I mentioned Google Maps. I would say Android, your smartphones. Larry, our chief exec, talks about the toothbrush test. Is the thing used every day by millions, if not billions of people, and is it really useful? Is it doing something useful and used all the time? And that's an interesting test for how you think about a product. So what's coming in future? What are we looking at? We're looking at trends that involve mobility and the accessibility and the use of big data sets, and how do those pass the toothbrush test? For me personally, I look at voice search. I look at what we're doing around voice activation of products. Isn't that going to be amazing when more and more devices can have multilinguistic, multi-language voice search? Or you could look at the self-driving cars and think, well, that's another thing that could end up being passing the toothbrush test.
We really focus on the idea of when choosing an organisation, your own values need to match the values of the organisation. So the question here is about values, and what role does values play within Google, and how is this implemented within the staff?
So we think a lot about that, because when it was a small company, pretty easy. You could, when I joined Google in 2006, there were a few hundred of us. We could meet every Friday evening for a beer in our Victoria office, and you could literally discuss stuff. And of course, as we've now grown to be more than 50,000 people globally, that becomes really hard. So actually, how do you communicate values in any organisation? Well, clearly, there's a belief mechanism you need to put in place. What do people believe in? You can say a lot of stuff, but if people don't believe it, it won't actually dissipate as values into the whole organisation. So focus on the user and all else will follow. So if we do really good things, if when we're designing products or we're working with clients, we're always thinking about what's good for the user, a lot of other things will flow out of that. So that's kind of one. And that's almost universal. Everyone in an organisation can think that. Or will be another one. Fast is better than slow. As we grew from being a small company to a big company, it's natural things become harder to do at scale, and you kind of slow up. A lot of people would describe them as big company problems. And how do you message that on a day-to-day basis? You need to believe that fast is literally better than slow. Once that belief mechanism is built into the company, then you don't have to communicate as much overtly, because people fundamentally believe, and then that drives their behaviours.
Technology and e-learning are one of the key forces that are driving education nowadays. How do you envisage future technologies in helping deliver education to the masses? Technology
can make things better. You kind of look at anything and say, how can we improve that with the application of technology? How can we improve learning with the application of data? Well, I would look at it, I've got 3 kids that are all in school at the moment, and I think in future generations, maybe not in the next few years, but with personalised learning, so using data, using real-time adaptive testing, wouldn't it be great if everyone was learning at their own pace? So something around me looks back at my education as sitting in a class with a whole bunch of people learning exactly the same thing at the same time, even though they might have different capabilities or interests. Being able to adapt that in real time through some system of adaptive learning, I think looks obvious of how it's going to work out in future. How that actually takes place, I've literally got no idea about.
Do you think leadership can be taught? And Kevin, what kind of leader are you, and what do you look for people who work for you?
Good question. So it's a fantastic question, and it's debated all the time in circles. So some people might have different capabilities for it, but absolutely it can be taught. I view myself as leadership by action. I think lots of people can talk about stuff, but actually managing teams is about helping teams achieve their goals.
What has been the most important business lesson you've learned as a student and as a professional as well?
So I would say, following on around the leadership conversation and how it's learned, you can teach it, but ultimately it's learned. So you've got to learn by experience, specifically in leading. Take on the desire to lead teams, and then experience through successes and failures. From what I've actually learned in the classroom, I spent 6 years as a student. I think at London Business School as and an MBA, and then as engineering undergraduate. I think don't overthink the numbers. I've done a lot of maths and finance in my time, but ultimately business is a people game. So if you can understand people's beliefs and passions, what are driving people to do what they're doing, I think that is the key that I take away. I think, yes, you can learn a whole bunch of stuff. And I remember my organisational behaviour lecturer telling me, you all love the finance and the marketing, but ultimately in 10, 15 years' time, the lesson you'll remember are organisational behaviour, the stuff I'm teaching you now that you're not really concentrating on. And I remember at the time going, of course you'd say that, but it's absolutely true. Business is a people game.
Sure. This brings me on to the question of any kind of advice that you may have for our students and graduates who wish to enter the global technology sector. What would that be?
I would say back to belief and passion. If you want to join the tech sector, take a step back and think, why do I want to be doing that? What are the underlying drivers? What are the things that get me excited and get me out of bed? Because if you believe in something and you're passionate about it, you're far more likely to overperform against your peers, and your competitors for jobs. So what is it that makes you want to join the tech sector? You go, oh, that's really interesting. That's the kind of thing that would get me running to work in the morning and then go and find a job associated with that passion. So Don't overthink the organisational structures or the grades or levels. Work out what it is that you're passionate about. Go and find something as close connected to that as possible, and then go and do it.
Great. Well, Kevin, thank you so much on behalf of everyone at the London School of Business and Finance and Global University Systems. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much. Good to talk to you.